How does a nation actually become a superpower? It's not just about winning one big war. It turns out it's more like a recipe. You need a strategic blueprint, a powerful economic engine, and a really compelling vision for the world. Today, we're going to dive into the origin story of America's rise to the top. So where does that story really kick off?
All right, so let me just ask you that straight up. When did the United States truly step onto the world stage as a superpower? Just take a second. What's the first moment that pops into your head? If you thought of World War II, hey, you're in good company. That is the most common answer by far. But the real pivotal moment, the turning point that honestly set the stage for everything that followed, happened almost 50 years earlier, in a surprisingly short but incredibly decisive conflict back in 1898, the Spanish-American War. See, before a nation can act like a superpower, it needs a plan, right? An intellectual roadmap, a blueprint for how to get there. And for America at the turn of the 20th century, that roadmap came from one man and his revolutionary ideas about the sea.
That man's name was Alfred Thayer Mahan. Now, he was a naval officer and a historian, but his thinking would go on to completely reshape U.S. foreign policy. This wasn't just some military guy. He was a grand strategist who essentially gave America the intellectual permission slip it needed for its global ambitions.
At the very heart of his work was this theory of sea power. Mahan argued that the real key to national greatness wasn't a massive army on land. Nope, it was all about controlling the world's oceans. Command the seas, he said, and you command the world's wealth, its trade, and its influence.
And Mahan broke this whole theory down into a complete system. It wasn't just about having a bunch of ships. He said you had to control the global trade routes, set up a worldwide network of naval bases, think of them like gas stations for your fleet, build a big modern navy that was ready for major battles, and, this is crucial, have the industrial power back home to build and maintain the whole shebang. This was the blueprint.
And you know what? That blueprint didn't just collect dust on a shelf. It got put into action in a conflict that would change the global balance of power for good.
The war itself was shockingly short. We're talking barely 6 months. After the sinking of the USS Maine acted as the spark, the U.S. Navy, which was built pretty much following Mahan's principles, just went in and secured decisive victories in both the Pacific and the Caribbean. By December, it was all over.
And the results were staggering. For Spain, this was the end of an era. The very last remnants of its centuries-old global empire were just gone. For the United States, it was the exact opposite. America shed its whole isolationist past and stepped out as a brand new imperial power on the world stage.
But this wasn't some rogue move by the military. Back home, this expansion was very much a joint effort between the president and Congress. It wasn't without huge controversy, though. This new imperial role kicked off these intense debates all across the country about whether America was overstepping its constitutional limits, about what its role in the world should even be.
The tangible results of that war? A new overseas empire. The U.S. picked up Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, and it established a protectorate over Cuba. Suddenly, you've got this network of naval bases and strategic locations almost exactly like Mahan had envisioned.
Okay, but let's be real. An overseas empire and a powerful navy are incredibly expensive. A superpower needs more than just military bases. It needs serious economic muscle. And right alongside its military rise, the U.S. was building an economic engine that would eventually dominate the world, the almighty dollar.
But the dollar's rise to the top was a gradual thing. It wasn't like a switch just flipped after World War II. For decades, in between the wars, the U.S. dollar actually shared the spotlight with the British pound sterling. The world's financial system basically had two anchors. The real power shift, the anomaly, came after 1945, when America's economy was just so overwhelmingly powerful that the dollar was the only one left standing.
So, we've got the strategic blueprint and the economic engine. But what about the why? Why do all this? A superpower needs a mission, an ideology, and that vision was spelled out by one of the most influential media figures of the entire 20th century.
In 1941, with the world engulfed in war, the publisher of Life magazine, Henry Luce, wrote a famous editorial where he laid out his vision for the American century. And this was so much more than just an opinion piece. It was a mission statement. It was a powerful argument that America sitting on the sidelines was no longer an option.
Luce's call to action was super clear. First, he said America had to ditch isolationism and jump into World War II. Second, it needed to accept its role as the new world leader, taking over from a declining British Empire.
And third, it had to use its immense power not just for itself, but to spread American principles like freedom and democracy all around the globe. This right here became the moral and ideological framework for American leadership.
So when you put it all together, you can really see how these separate pieces combined to create something totally new. It wasn't just one event, but this powerful combination of 4 key pillars.
First, you have the blueprint, Mahan's theory of sea power, which provided the strategic logic. Then you get the action, the 1898 war that put that theory into practice and actually created an empire. Third, you've got the engine, the steady rise of the US dollar, which became the world's economic foundation. And finally, the vision, Luce's American century, which gave all that power a purpose.
This combination of strategy, military action, economic might, and ideology, that's what forged the American superpower of the 20th century. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. In a world with totally new challenges, from cyber threats to climate change, what does it even mean to be a superpower in the 21st century?